terrified. I feel stranded but know there's people on my side. These thoughts are like refugees settling in my mind. I can taste hope like water on the tip of my tongue, like the first sip after a nameless desert run. My thoughts are scorching in the sun. I feel hope running in the water in my veins, a constant that's keeping me sane. It lets me handle all this pain. I feel hope. I feel hope. I feel hope. Hope. It's on your face. You wear it like you'll never go away. I never know exactly what to say. This is when it all could change. I feel hope running in the water in my veins, a constant that's keeping me sane. It lets me handle all this pain. I feel hope. I feel hope. I feel hope. Hope is your mind saying you have already seen this place. Hope is your heart saying you got it all to do what it takes. Hope is your mind saying you have already seen this place. Hope is your heart saying you got it all to do what it takes. Whoa, 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 yes, I feel hope running in the water in my veins, the constant that's keeping me sane. It lets me handle all this pain. I feel hope. I feel hope. I feel hope. It's a pain if you keep rolling back again. I'll welcome you this time as a friend, 'cause I know it's never gonna end. Hi, my name is Amelie,
My name is John.
and we are 7,000 apart. We have been a part of the Be the Light Walk for the last 2 years, and we're so honored to be here with you tonight as well. Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming,
was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Good evening, welcome, and thank you all for joining tonight. My name is Jay Zollar, and I am the General Manager here at WLUK-TV. I've been here for 22 years. I'm also a native of Green Bay. I'm married now, and I have 3 children and 3 stepchildren. They range from ages 27 down to 15. 10 years ago, I had my first personal exposure to death by suicide. The incident revolved around a husband and a father of 1 teenage daughter. The husband and father took his life and broke many hearts, including mine. It was impossible for me to imagine the pain of those left behind. I believe that it was time for a station like ours to raise awareness, reduce the stigma associated with suicide, assist in the healing of those left behind, and do something to help prevent it from happening. We decided back then to work with local people and local organizations who were directly impacted by suicide, and we created numerous public service announcements that we have been airing on our stations ever since. I am honored and thankful to be here with all of you tonight. Over 950 people registered to walk. If you didn't have the chance to walk earlier today, there's no rush. You can walk even now while watching this live stream. You can walk when we are finished tonight. Much like the journey through the pain after suicide, there is no set path or set time to finish by. What matters is that tonight we choose to take the next steps in the journey of healing and hope. Tonight we will remember our loved ones and honor their memory together. Remember, everyone is at a different stage in their journey, and wherever you are, there is no shame here. Allow this evening to nurture you, to support you, to encourage you. We are stronger when we are together. If I may take a moment, I would like to recognize and thank our sponsors. They include Bellin Health Foundation, Bellin Psychiatric Center, Aurora Baycare Medical Center, Willow Creek Behavioral Health, Brown County Coalition for Suicide Prevention, Humana, Sanamax, our friends with 7,000 Apart, and all of our fundraising teams raising much needed funds on our GoFundMe charity campaign at bethelightwalk.com/donate. I encourage you to leave comments in the chat box and on social media using the hashtag BTLW20. We are on Facebook and bethelightwalk.com live on YouTube. Share the stream on your profile across social media. Leave memories and inspirational quotes. Now I would like to introduce and welcome our first guest tonight. He is the 42nd mayor of Green Bay, elected in April of last year. He was born and raised in Green Bay. Welcome Eric Genrich, the mayor of Green Bay.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Jay. Made tonight possible. Obviously, really wish I was able to be with you in person as I was last year, but know that I am obviously here with you virtually and more importantly in spirit, and just really feel honored to be a part of tonight's program, to welcome you all to tonight's event. I, like most people, have been impacted by suicide, not as directly as many of you who are participating tonight, but my grandfather took his life when my dad was only 2 years old, and so left my dad without a father, and my dad's siblings, my aunt and uncle, without a dad, and obviously had a significant impact on his wife, my grandmother. And even though I never knew him and my dad never knew him, that impact is still felt today. It still echoes through the ages, and it's something that I think a lot about, actually, and think about what it must have been like for my grandfather to be 40-ish years old in the 1950s, struggling with alcohol and depression, and how lonely that must have been, and how much stigma there was surrounding those struggles, especially all those years ago. But obviously that stigma is still with us today. And I think that's why it's so important for us to come together and bring light to the fact that there are so many people that are struggling with depression and anxiety and suicidal thoughts. And I think it's more vital than ever that we bring attention to them and make it clear to people that it's okay. It's really important to talk about those issues publicly now more than ever. In the midst of this pandemic, I think rates of depression and anxiety are higher than maybe we've ever seen. And so it's just really important for us to come together in this way and in others and bring attention to those struggles. I know, me personally, I've had plenty of sleepless nights these last few months. I've been very stressed out about the situation that we're in. And it's reassuring, honestly, to hear others talk about it, to hear people like Michelle Obama talk about her sort of low-grade depression that she's experiencing, to hear Dak Prescott, the quarterback for the Cowboys, talk about the struggles that he's faced in the wake of his brother's apparent suicide. So just, again, very honored to be able to participate in tonight's event. Thanks again to those who are participating, who are walking, the sponsors, volunteers, everyone who made tonight possible. We just encourage you all to be kind, to be gentle to yourselves and to others, and to be here tomorrow. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Mayor Genrich. We really appreciate those words very much. If I may just take a moment to remind you about the many great resources that are available to you at the virtual resource fair link at bethelightwalk.com/resources. I'll say that again, bethelightwalk.com/resources. There are some terrific resources there for everybody to be able to take advantage of. So please consider that. Next, I would like to introduce to you Kim Sandstrom, therapist and crisis counselor, who will share an update of the Brown County Coalition for Suicide Prevention and a new initiative that will help survivors begin their healing in their earliest and their darkest hours. Please welcome Kim Sandstrom.
Hello, and welcome to the 2020 Be the Light Walk. As Jay mentioned, my name is Kim Sandstrom, and I'm a member of the Brown County Coalition for Suicide Prevention, a committee. I belong to the committee of the Be the Light Walk, and also the Lost Team Leader. Tonight, I want to share with you about the work the Coalition is doing in its initiatives with suicide prevention, as well as a new postvention program we are going to start here in Brown County. The Coalition is made up of multiple community agencies and disciplines. We look at what is happening in our community and form various committees to address any issues that is needed. We currently have committees such as the Be the Light Walk, which is our primary funding source, our youth initiatives, which include the Hope Squad and SOS, public safety and veterans committees, gatekeepers, which are those who provide QPR and SOS training in our community, LGBTQ, and our newest initiative, a postvention program called the Lost Team. Statistics show us that those who have lost loved ones to suicide are at higher risk of suicide. This led us to implementing this new postvention LOSS team. LOSS stands for Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors, those who have lost loved ones to suicide. Myself and Lori Keene, another member of the coalition, attended the LOSS conference in California last October. There, we were able to connect and meet tonight, Brandy Lidbeck. There, we also met with Dr. Frank Campbell. 20 years of working with those bereaved by suicide, saw the need for this postvention program, and began the first LOSS team in Baton Rouge, Louisiana in 1997. LOSS teams are now all over the United States and the world. Grief after the loss of a loved one is difficult, but the loss through suicide is like no other, and only those who have experienced that loss understand. The LOSS team is a team of clinicians and survivors of suicide loss. When there is a loss, the LOSS team will go to that location of the suicide and meet with survivors. We will offer resources, support, and most importantly, hope. The average length of time it takes for a survivor to seek help after their loss is 4.5 years. When a LOSS team is involved, that time shortens to just 39 days. We began our journey in starting this LOSS team in December with the hope to having it ready to go in a year. The LOSS committee, which is an amazing group of survivors, community members, professionals, police agencies, funeral directors, counselors, and practitioners, all came together to create this program. I am forever grateful for this amazing team that helped make and develop this program and have such a compassion for wanting to help survivors. We began sharing about the LOSS team in the community, and people were eager to help in so many ways, donating monetarily, providing items for our resource bags, providing their times and talents to get our resources, providing technical equipment so we could train our volunteers, and so much more. We held an information session for survivors to help us create our LOSS team, and now we have an amazing team of clinicians and survivors. One of the biggest hurdles that we heard from the other LOSS teams was getting the support of law enforcement and having them call a LOSS team out when they are called to a suicide scene. In July, Officer Tony Phelps and I of the De Pere Police Department and myself attended the Brown County Chiefs meeting and shared with them about the LOSS team. Our law enforcement here in our area have been so supportive in the efforts of suicide prevention and now are embracing this new postvention initiative. With the efforts of the support of the coalition, the LOSS committee, the LOSS volunteers, funeral directors, law enforcement, the community, Brandy Lidbeck, and Dr. Frank Campbell, I am thrilled to share with all of you tonight that the LOSS team began serving Brown County on Tuesday, September 8th. The LOSS team is created as a postvention to suicide. However, it comes full circle to suicide prevention. We want survivors to know there is help out there. There are survivors who understand your grief that is like no other. And most importantly, there is hope. If you are interested in wanting more information about the LOSS team, please email us at lossteambc@gmail.com. Now, I would like to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Brandy Lidbeck. Brandy is a licensed marriage and family therapist and the author of The Gift of Second, Healing from the Impact of Suicide. Brandy coordinates the LOSS team in the Central Valley of California and speaks all over the country to suicide loss survivors at events and conferences. As a two-time suicide loss survivor herself, Brandy has a heart for those who know the pain suicide brings and wants fellow survivors to know and experience healing connection after such a profound tragedy. Welcome, Brandy Lidbeck.
Good evening. I am so excited to be joining you all tonight. I spoke at the Be the Light Walk back in 2018, and I was thrilled to be asked to return this year. I'm sad that we are not together in person, but I trust that you are all together with your family and friends, supporting and encouraging one another now. I am thankful to the Walk Committee for planning this year as a virtual event so that we can all connect in some capacity. As Kim mentioned, my name is Brandy Lidbeck, and I'm a licensed therapist in California. More importantly, however, I am one of you. I'm a 2-time suicide loss survivor. I lost my mom to suicide when I was 10 years old, and also lost my cousin shortly after his return home from Iraq, where he served our country in the United States Army. Suicide has devastated my family. It was 1991 when my mom passed, and there were 0 supports in place. There were no support groups, no internet to connect with other survivors, and in fact, nobody was even talking about suicide because there was such a stigma attached to it. As many kids feel after a suicide, I wrestled with shame and seeing my own value. If my own mom didn't want to stay, what does that say about me? Didn't my mom love me? Didn't she know I needed her? I chose not to tell others because I was fearful of what people would think and say about her, about my family, and about me. So I allowed all the kids at school to believe that my parents were divorced. I went 13 years before meeting another survivor. 13 years. And when I sat down with this friend and heard her say the very things that I had privately been thinking in my own head for all of those years, I felt a little of my heart healed that day. To know that I wasn't the only daughter whose parent did this was helpful. I had spent so many years lost in my own thoughts and beliefs and trying desperately to avoid the pain and pretending that it didn't affect me. My friend had explained that she had been going to therapy since her dad passed, and it was incredibly helpful for her. She encouraged me to do the same, and so I did. My journey to healing started 13 years after my mom passed, all because a fellow survivor shared that it was helpful for her in her own grief. Suicide loss is such a unique type of grief. Those left behind often wrestle with ongoing guilt, regret, shame, and trauma. Survivors often struggle with questions of why and how, but the only person who can answer those questions accurately is no longer here. After a loss, we may have ample support initially, but as time moves on, our support seems to disappear. People stop coming around or checking in. Perhaps that we fear that our friends will grow tired of hearing us say the same old story for the 100th time, and so we stop sharing, we stop talking. Maybe well-meaning friends tell the recent widow or widower it's time to move on and encourage them to start dating again, despite it only being a few short months since burying their significant other. All too often, ignorant people will make hurtful comments or jokes about suicide. All of these scenarios leave us feeling isolated and alone. We feel as if nobody could understand, and so we stop trying. Sometimes the hardest thing we do each day is to get out of bed, and nobody understands the amount of strength it took to get out of bed and how we want nothing more than just to crawl right back in, pull the covers over our heads, and pray that it was all just a horrible nightmare. But it's not a nightmare. It's worse. It's our reality. I'm sure we're all familiar with the Me Too movement that took over our world a few years back. Women and men courageously stepped up to speak their truth about the abuse that they were subjected to in their homes, their workplace, churches, and schools. They spoke up and the world listened. It was amazing. I found this definition on Wikipedia and I wanted to share it with you. Me Too is a movement against sexual harassment and sexual assault to empower women through empathy and strength in numbers, especially young and vulnerable women, by visibly demonstrating how many women have survived sexual assault and harassment. The Me Too movement brought people from all over the world into a safe place where they could share about their abuse, their trauma, their experiences, and have others for the first time say, "You are not alone. I understand. Me too." It allowed survivors of sexual violence to connect with one another, and they were able to receive support, resources, and advocacy. And it allowed them to start the healing process. It also convicted criminals, united survivors, and provided strength in numbers. A writer by the name of Rebecca Beach wrote an article with the headline, "Me Too has changed our culture, and now it's changing our laws." Another woman, Miss Crook, stated that when I embarked on this thing, when I decided to speak out, I was worried I was going to feel more alone than when I started. And to feel the opposite of that is pretty remarkable. We're all one cell of this new organism. If we go back to the original definition and highlight a few specific words, we can see a close parallel to suicide loss survivors. Me Too empowers through empathy and strength in numbers by visibly demonstrating how many have survived. Because of those courageous men and women who stood up and spoke their truth, the world began to listen. The same type of support that is available to those in the Me Too movement is also available to us as suicide loss survivors. We too are having laws passed to help those struggling with suicidal ideation. All over the country, schools are printing the phone number of the suicide prevention hotline on the back of students' ID badges, because we're learning that talking about suicide does not give people the idea to take their own lives, but instead empowers them with resources in difficult times. A recent law just passed that will enable a 3-digit phone number similar to 911 to be available for those seriously contemplating suicide and allow them to get connected to support even quicker. The Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco recently had a safety net built on this structure to prevent those who may have gone to the bridge to end their life. Similar protective measures are being implemented all over the United States. We are speaking and people are listening. Now, you already heard the good news from the committee about the county starting a loss team. This is so wonderful. This means that no survivor will have to walk through this alone, wandering around trying to find someone who understands. Instead, they will be connected with resources within moments of their loss. I run a loss team back in California, and it is such a wonderful resource for new survivors and a healing agent for those of us further along in our journey. LOSS, it stands for Local Outreach to Suicide Survivors, and it was created by Dr. Frank Campbell in Louisiana. There are only a few dozen teams throughout the world, and your committee has done a lot to create your own team here in Brown County. It's made up of survivors who have lost a loved one to suicide. They arrive immediately to the home or the hospital 24 hours a day, 7 days a week after a suicide has taken place. And they provide resources and support to family and friends. In his research, Dr. Campbell found that the typical suicide loss survivor takes approximately 4.5 years to access any type of support. Mine was 13 years, as I shared. But with a loss team in place, that time is dramatically reduced to just 39 days. Because we know that those impacted by suicide are at a higher risk than the general population, this postvention work actually serves as prevention as well. Me Too is incredibly powerful. On a recent visit to a family, 3 of us arrived to a home. There were some family members outside on the front lawn acting as gatekeepers before we could enter the house. One of our team members expressed their condolences to the family, and they responded with, "Thank you. We don't need any visitors. You can go." The second team member mentioned that we had brought resources to the family so that they can access support in the community. The woman again thanked us and told us that we could leave the folders on the front porch and that they would reach out if they needed. As we were leaving, I quickly shared that we were all survivors ourselves and we understand how horribly tragic today is for her family. The woman stopped in her tracks, looked at us and said, "You have all lost someone to suicide?" We nodded and she replied, "Please, come into our home." We went inside and this woman asked us to sit at the kitchen table as she gathered her entire family around us as we shared. 18 people stood around us asking us questions about how this could have happened and what to do next. That is the power of Me Too. On another visit, we went to the hospital to meet with a family who had just lost their daughter and was awaiting organ donation. The social worker had called us but warned us before entering the room that the family had agreed to see us for just 5 minutes, but that they wanted the social worker to come back in within 5 minutes to ask the loss team to leave. So we went into the room, introduced ourselves, and explained that we were suicide loss survivors. The dad said, "You have both lost members of your family to suicide?" We confirmed that we had, and he quickly stood up, grabbed 2 more chairs, and sat us down right next to him. When the social worker came back in 5 minutes later to rescue the family, the dad told them that he would like us to stay and that they were okay. We stayed for 45 minutes and listened to this family's tearful heartbreak of saying goodbye to their daughter. That is the power of Me Too. Brene Brown writes, "The 2 most powerful words when we're in struggle, Me Too." And C.S. Lewis writes, "Friendship is born at that moment when one person says to another, 'What? You too? I thought I was the only one.'" I recently learned an amazing fact about fire ants. When fire ants encounter large amounts of water, such as in a flood, they will attach to one another using their jaws and their sticky leg pads to form a life raft. Thousands of them will be connected and float on the top of the water until they can get to the safety of dry land. They can remain like this for weeks at a time. What's even more amazing is that they put their queen and all the larvae on top of the raft to keep them safe because they know that the future of their colony depends on them both. Additionally, they recognize that the larvae are unable to survive if their colony was not protecting this most vulnerable group. The larva depends on others who have been where they now stand, and one day, when these larvae grow and mature to be ants, they will hoist the new larva on top of their life raft and float them to safety. This is a beautiful depiction of how a lost team works, and Brown County will now get to be a life raft to new survivors. If being a part of the lost team interests you, please get in touch with your WLUK committee, and they can point you in the right direction. I promise you a little part of your soul will also be healed each time you guide a new survivor to safe harbor. And finally, for all of you defeated, overwhelmed, and feeling like your grief is going to fully consume you, I wanted to share this. When we think about grief, we all have images in our minds and in our hearts of what we expect it to look like, how long it should last, and how it should or shouldn't impact us. It's good to keep the following in mind as you walk this path of devastation. Healing is never accomplished alone. It is never easy. It is never linear. It is never on a set time frame, nor is it fast or without pain. It is never complete, and it is never consistent. In contrast, healing is necessary and beneficial. It can be isolating at times, and it's unpredictable. It's possible. It requires a choice. It's ever-changing, and it's unique, and it's hard work, and it involves feeling all of the emotions. Remember, grief is not a comparison. It's not something we can look at others and judge if we are doing better or worse. Grief is unique and not something to be measured or compared. I know that many of you are struggling to get out of bed every morning. I get that. I know others of you are on a mission to prevent every future suicide so that no other family ever has to experience something like this again. Well done. Still, others of you are finding healing in writing about your journey every step of the way, while some of you are finding support in being in support groups. Maybe this Be the Light walk is the only time you allow yourself each year to think about your loss. Wherever your journey takes you, be kind to yourself. Do not shame yourself for not being further along. We too are all a bunch of larvae and in need of a life raft. Thank you and good night.
Before we begin our names memorial, I would like to conclude tonight with two scripture verses that have meant a lot to me personally over the past many years. When I need to restore my hope, when I need to generate and regenerate myself and think about my future, I would read and meditate on these verses again and again, and I still do so today. The first verse is Jeremiah 29:11. And it reads, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." And the other one is Romans 15:11. I'm sorry, it's 15:13. "May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace as you trust in him, so that you may overflow with hope by the power of the Holy Spirit." Remember, we are to be the light of the world, a light that is so desperately needed today. Remember, there is hope for a brighter tomorrow. We are all in this together and here for each other. You're not alone. Again, I want to give thanks for the guests that we had this evening, and thank you for watching tonight and for walking. And now it's time for our names memorial. Peace and good night.
you.